Hello. Today I'm going to talk about the structure of comedies and what those rules generally are that date back all the way to the ancient Greeks, who originally started these traditions and conventions of comic plots. So at the start of a narrative, there's usually, but not always, a sense of order and normality. And that order and normality is quickly disturbed by the actions of the comic villain or the antagonist. And sometimes it's a dramatic device like disguise. And there follows after that a period of confusion and chaos and disorder. And the tension mounts. And there are all kinds of problems and misunderstandings. And it's at this point where we as readers or viewers or members of an audience think, how on earth is this mess going to be cleared up? And obviously, if we are used to reading comedies or used to going to the theatre and watching comedic drama, then we have a certain set of expectations, and we know that if it's a comedy, that all of these problems and misunderstandings are going to be cleared up. But whilst we are witnessing all this chaos and confusion, what generally happens is that we witness folly in others. And we like it because it makes us feel good when we see other people being stupid. And we often witness another character's humiliation. And we rather like that too. It's very entertaining. That process, as you know, is called Schadenfreude. So eventually, we get towards the climax of the chaos and confusion. And then in the comic ending, all those problems generally are resolved. That ending is always reassuring, endorsing the value of the life that we all share together as human beings. And that's when, in the ending and the comic resolution, characters often recognise what's been going on, and they forgive and forget, and there's a sense of joy and celebration, often in the form of a betrothal, engagement, or promise to marry, or even weddings themselves. So there's very much a feeling of everyone being reintegrated into the social group, a sense of social harmony being restored. Even if it means settling for whatever joys are possible in life. And luck sometimes plays a part in the events, or maybe a random act of God, which, as you know, is called Deus Ex Machina. I'm speaking funny because I've got a pen lid in my mouth. And obviously luck plays its part in restoring normality at the end. But there are just some differences. As opposed to tragedy, which is something to be taken very seriously indeed, comedy is obviously, really lightweight in comparison. And because I guess the subject matter is essentially fairly lightweight, characterization is often at the expense of comic plotting. And by that I mean that the characters that are presented, that are portrayed, that are crafted by the writer are often less complex, fairly two-dimensional characters, fairly flat characters, to use E.M. Foster's phrase when he talked about flat and rounded characters. So, tragedies tend to have well-rounded, complex characters, and comedies tend to, because of the lightweight nature of the story, of the narrative, comedies tend to have fairly flat, not very complicated characters. So that's one difference between comedy and tragedy. Another thing is that comic endings are often criticised as being a bit facile, and by that I mean, ignoring the real complexities of an issue, being a bit superficial. And consequently, comic endings are often said to, not really challenge society very much, because priority is given in the end to kind of everybody being reconciled with each other. And so when you're talking about comic endings, quite often you have to think about that. Is it a cop-out? Is the ending a cop-out? Quite often, comic endings are cop-outs. They aren't, very real. They're a little bit silly. They're facile. They are, there really just to fulfill the kind of conventions of comedy. We expect a happy ending, therefore everything is sorted out, regardless of how real that might be. So, and equally, the difference between comedy and tragedy is that in comedies, it's often the journey of the character, how they respond to situations that they're in, that matters. The journey that matters, not what happens to them in the end, because the focus is, with comedies, inevitably on entertaining us. So it's all about the journey, and the journey being that, how they sort everything out, how they cope with what happens to them. And when we're talking about Small Island, all this is very, very different. Important than being earnest, this all kind of works, pretty much. But Small Island, because it's predominantly a historical text with kind of documentary realism, this sort of stuff tends to differ. And I'll talk about that in the next session.